Saints, do you realize that sometimes it's God's will for you to suffer? Remember Jesus. That was the thing with Jesus. He said, nevertheless, not my will, but yours. It was the Father's will that Jesus suffer the persecution of the cross. Sometimes it's God's will that we suffer as well. Suffer persecution. I heard someone say once, the safest place to be is in the center of God's will. Now, I understand what they're trying to say, but I also kind of disagree. It wasn't safe for Jesus to be in the center of God's will, or for Peter to be in the center of God's will. Sometimes when we follow Christ and we say, I'm going to follow you no matter what, God sometimes desires to bring glory to himself by allowing us to suffer persecution. And so if that's you, what do? Well, you entrust your soul to a faithful Creator. And by the way, this is exactly what Jesus did. Remember, what Peter's doing is he's always just pointing back to Christ, back to Christ. Remember chapter 2, verse 23, when Jesus was reviled. He didn't revile in return. When Jesus suffered, he didn't threaten, but he continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. Jesus, when he was suffering, even though he was in the will of God, he said, God, the Father, I'm going to trust you. And Peter's just saying, Christians, that's what you're to do. You're to entrust your soul to God. And it's possible to think, well, God's not being a faithful God then, if he's allowing me to suffer. No, Peter knows, as someone who saw Christ suffer, as someone who suffered himself, he's saying, no, God is still faithful. God has a good plan in the end.